Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Leon Ezekiel Iscares, an intern from the Ateneo SALT, and I will be the room coordinator for Room 5 of the ADL Learning Exchange. I have the pleasure to introduce our first speaker for today, a professor from Ateneo de Manila-Loyola School's Finance and Accounting Department, Mr. Alfonso Miguel Sevidal. He will share with us how finance, as complex and tedious as it may seem, can still be taught in the most engaging way possible to the students. Mr. Sevidal, the floor is yours.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to the to Ateneo SALT and the School of Education for having me. I'm Sevi, and I'll be talking about finance, a play on finance, and how I guess I was able to teach the subject in the context, of course, the pandemic and remote learning. So I just wanted to introduce myself first. I'm Sevi. I'm currently an analyst with BPI. That's my full-time job, and my part-time job is a lecturer, not a professor. Let's be politically correct here. I haven't earned the PhD, so I can't be called that. But I'm a part-time lecturer for SOM in both the finance and accounting and quantitative methods departments, and I graduated ME in 2017. For online learning, I've been teaching actually since I graduated. I've been teaching for the last 4 years. But for the Blue Cloud or the online version of the course, the courses that I taught were Fin 115, so that's the financial management course, and then I also taught an analytics elective, specifically analytics. I guess to kind of contextualize where I'm coming from, the things that and sorry, please feel free to chat if my connection becomes wonky or anything. But I guess for now it's all good. Assuming that there's nothing. I guess the main thing that I want to communicate, or the premise of the online learning approach that I have is these three words really: asynchronous, synchronous, and synchronized. And the way I put it, and this is something that I put in my syllabus or the module 0 based on the ADL, is that through synchronous and asynchronous activities, we are synchronized toward our learning outcomes. So in that context, it's really a feedback loop where we start with asynchronous learning, and then for my iteration of it, I'm heavy on group consultation. We have synchronous sessions, and that translates to, or that eventually leads to assessments that deepen learning. And it's this feedback loop. I know that the subtitle for my presentation was designing effective asynchronous learning, but it's really a feedback loop. It's not just asynchronous learning. It's really this ecosystem or feedback loop that that I try to create with each course that makes it, I guess, successful or effective. So again, through synchronous and asynchronous activities, whether it's assessments or modules, it makes us synchronized toward the learning outcomes, which is what we want to achieve at the end of the day. And I want to discuss that in 4 major points. So first would be how I construct my asynchronous modules. The second is how I follow through with sync. The third is the way I engage with students. And then fourth and finally, the assessments that I believe deepen learning. So first on asynchronous modules. One of the things that I do different, because the typical approach is that you give the definition or you give the theory, and then you give examples. So you start with the theory or the theorem, and then you give the empirical data or that's observable. I do it reverse. So case before theory, because from experience, it's much more relatable for the students, and they actually engage with the material much better if you start off with a real example or a case, because it kind of gets them hooked onto the material already. So we start off with a case, and then we sort of decompose or reverse engineer it as we go through further with the lesson or the module. And you see the examples that I have. For example, I talked about Taylor Swift, who recently launched a new album or re-recording her previous albums. I talked about how that has finance implications. And that got people hooked because, oh, we like Taylor Swift. We're fans of her work. And oh, we didn't know that there's a finance angle to it. Of course, all of the lessons that I have were centered on the impact of the pandemic. When I taught macro and industry analysis, for example, I thought of any lesson on that would be meaningless if I didn't talk about the pandemic and how it impacted various industries and the macro economy. So that's what I started off the bat. And this case before theory approach, I guess, allows students to appreciate it a bit more, that because when they get to the nitty gritty or when they get to the theories, they realize that, oh, this is how it translates to the actual work. This is how it translates to the real world. The second thing that I try to emphasize with the asynchronous modules that I have is demos and examples. Finance can be very up in the air, admittedly, as someone who was a student and remains a student of finance. It's very up in the air, and it's easy to get lost in all of the jargon, especially when you try to transition from textbook to real world. So to break that barrier, I do a lot of I'm so sorry I got caught. Let me just repeat that. Could I just confirm, Leon, where I got caught?
I think in the Taylor Swift part of your slide, sir.
Maybe Galvin or Leon. Was I caught before this, or was this the slide where I got caught?
I think this was
You,
the slide. Yeah, we heard the
yes, sir.
Taylor Swift bit.
Sorry. So we're okay in this slide. Just to confirm.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Apologies. So as I was saying, I'm heavy on demos and examples. And on the right screenshot, you'll see how I have a lot of when I teach financial modeling or financial statement analysis, I actually record myself building the models, and because of that, the students are able to follow and kind of repeat over and over, and they can go back to the lesson. So it's something that I think is an advantage of asynchronous, that they're able to go back and see that, oh, this is how it works. And when they build their own models or when they do their own analysis, they're able to play the videos that I pre-record while where their own work is open. So I guess they're able to appreciate it more in that regard. The final thing that I want to emphasize about asynchronous is that, and this is something that behavioral theories that behavioral theorists kind of observe. The thing about asynchronous, and I guess the flip side to being flexible, is that there are less intentional breaks. Unlike when we're at school in the real world, there's recess, there's lunch, there are breaks in between classes. Here, it's easy for students to kind of just go and barrel through the modules. So I intentionally insert modules that are, not serious at all. So references from pop culture, the likes of High School Musical, the series, Avatar, Olivia Rodrigo, and students actually relate to me, and they really tell me during consultations that they like these intentional breaks because it's a sign for them that, okay, I've done enough finance for today. It's time to take a break, because it's easy for them to get, especially when it was still a quarterly setup, it was easy for them to get pressured to finish the modules fast. But with these intentional breaks inserted literally in the middle of the Canvas modules or in the middle of the sessions, it gives them an intentional break, and that works in their favor. The second thing I want to emphasize is how I follow through with sync. Because of how I constructed the asynchronous modules, the sync that I do is a lot deeper. So for example, when I discussed financial statement analysis already asynchronously. What I do in the synchronous sessions is more example and case driven. So I talk about the financial statements of vaccine manufacturers or pharmaceutical companies, which of course is relevant, especially with the vaccine rollout, or the impact of COVID on capital markets. So I'm only, because I'm part-time, I can only do sync once a week, but it's more than enough because I save the sync sessions for these deepening exercises, or case examples or case discussions. And the advantage of remote learning is that it's sort of broken the barrier with regard to inviting guest speakers. So for the topics where I'm not the expert, such as economics or industry analysis, I'm able to invite speakers from the likes of BPI, Boston Consulting Group. And I think that's been a major advantage of this asynchronous setup, that the distance has gotten smaller, literally. You can now invite experts via Zoom. And then I think check-in is really important because we are in the pandemic after all. So I literally start every synchronous session. I call them class halls with Mentimeter surveys, and just how they are, how everyone is. And at the end, what I do is a Q&A. So I noticed that no one really talks. No one really raises their hand or unmutes. So what I do instead is I have a question sheet where people can input their questions, and then we tackle it over time. Because some students are shyer in that regard. So the Q&A forum at the end of the session actually allows them to ask more questions without having to raise their hand or unmute, which might be an advantage for some of the more introverted or shy students. I'm heavy on group consultation, so I think for every six synchronous sessions that I do 3 group consultations where I meet with every group. It's an opportunity for me to get feedback on the course and to iterate or calibrate. The second is for more extensive discussion. During a class-wide session or a class-wide sync class, it's not possible to have that back and forth Q&A. That's what you get with a group consultation over a smaller audience. And I think that's one of the advantages really of group consultations. And at the same time, it allows me to check up on students. Of course, not everyone has the same pace of learning. So, I get to see if students are on the right track, especially towards summative assessments. And then which topics are where people are having difficulty. It's actually a divide and conquer strategy on my part, because I can see off the bat, okay, some students are having difficulty with these topics, other students in these topics. And what I do is I consolidate all of that feedback and relay it back to the class. The other way in which I engage the class consistently is with the Slack channel. So you get similar benefits if you use Discord, but I have a channel dedicated for class questions and open discussion. So when it comes to class questions, what students usually do is that they message me directly. They don't want to ask in an open forum type, I guess, because some are scared or some are shyer. But what I do is that I answer them anonymously. So it benefits the entire class. So as a question raised by the one student, I answer that in the class-wide channel, and that benefits everyone because it's a question that might have popped up eventually for some of the other students. And at the same time, the engagement that I saw from students, that over time, as the course progressed, they were sharing on their own will or on their own volition. So on the open discussion channel, they were relating the class. They were relating what was happening to the class to what was happening in the market or what was happening in the global economy, which I found as a positive because they were actually relating the lesson to real life on their own. I might extend a bit, apologies, so maybe just 2 minutes. But what I saw was that engagement also went beyond the course. I got messages from students saying that, oh, this is really random, but I remembered your lesson on financial statement analysis. I'm doing it now in terms of internship. And I just wanted to say thank you because I appreciate this a lot more. I never got to say thank you because I wouldn't have been motivated to do the internship without this class. So, I think that it's something that we teachers know that engagement is beyond the classroom, and you're a teacher for life. So I think that the foundations that I was able to establish in the course was able to carry over in the real world. Finally, in terms of assessment, so we talked about asynchronous modules, we talked about sync classes, and finally how I deepen that engagement via group consultation and Slack. And finally, on the assessment. So one of the things that I do uniquely, and even before the pandemic, was I made students play Monopoly in class. What they did was they played Monopoly and then they recorded the transactions. Eventually, they built financial statements out of it. So from those Monopoly transactions, they built financial models out of it. And this is really a scaffolding tool because, again, finance can be up in the air. So doing something as simple and as mundane as Monopoly kind of breaks that barrier. And it allows them to approach the deeper topics a bit less intimidated. So Monopoly, I've been using it as a scaffolding tool to approach higher order exercises or deeper topics in finance. And the summative assessment that I have, which I break down into passes. So one pass for financial analysis, one pass for industry analysis, is an integrated analysis of a publicly listed company. So this is an example for Amazon. The goal is to buy, hold, or is to make a call on whether to buy, hold, or sell the stock. And because of, again, the foundations that they have with asynchronous modules, with playing Monopoly, which gives them a nice introduction that's not so intimidating, what I saw is that all of the students are able to successfully kind of tackle this summative assessment head on. Again, reflecting how the scaffolding works and how the starting off with something simple like Monopoly and scaffolding that or doing a build-up method translates to higher order applications eventually. I guess just to sort of talk about it further, to talk about success indicators, correlation is not causation. But I did see students who gave me feedback after the SEM that they were saying that, oh, we participated in competitions, or during our internship, we were able to apply a lot of what you taught us in the class. And I think that this entire ecosystem of asynchronous group consultations, sync classes, and summative assessments kind of contributes to that appreciation even beyond the classroom. And you can see that in how some of my former students were able to succeed in competitive settings. And then finally, just to wrap up, I extended by a bit, but there's this book that I read this year. The title is Algorithms to Live By, The Computer Science of Human Decisions by Brian Christian and Tom Griffiths. And I think the overfitting versus oversimplification dilemma in linear regression, if some of you are math profs or stat profs, I think you'll appreciate this analogy. But jumping from the observation in the book that algorithms can teach us the meaning of rationality and how to live. The challenge of teaching online and teaching in general can be likened to this overfitting and oversimplification dilemma. Overfitting, we see that so much when we overfit to the data instead of trying to get something that's accurate for the entire data set or the entire broad problem. We overfit when students study to pass the test. That's overfitting. I think it's similar for the educational setting. If we just adjust to all of the students' concerns and we kind of bend, that's an example of overfitting. The polar opposite is oversimplification, where we just take what we did in the pre-pandemic setting in the on-site, and then we just take and replicate it online. Just like building statistical models, a lot of it is calibration. So I actually don't believe that if we overfit to these 48 learning hours, 60 learning hours, or you should have this many modules, I think that's not the point. Because that's an example of overfitting. A lot of it really at the end of the day is calibration and adjustment. And ultimately, that's why group consultations and continuous feedback work for this. So that's been the experience that I've had in the last 2 semesters that I taught. And ultimately, we will never get it right 100%. We will never get any of this right because we're all adjusting. And that's what I tell students also. I guess what's important is the openness and the approach to making mistakes and ultimately calibrating and iterating, which is the way to success really for modeling on its own. So again, just wanted to thank the School of Educ and SALT. And sorry, I went a bit over time, but happy to take any questions or open forum. I don't know how it's going to work if there's a moderator, but I guess to tackle some of the questions ahead. Sorry again for the internet connection problem or the disconnect, but we have a question from Bien on why I use Slack instead of Canvas. The reason for this is that Canvas is a bit more limited in terms of the engagement. So it's basically Yahoo Messenger. But with Slack, you get group channel engagements. Sometimes you can actually gauge the reactions of the students from emoji reactions. That's something I'm a millennial, so that's kind of how it works. So even if there's no direct response, which is what you would get with, say, a discussion board, with the emoji reactions, I kind of sense the pulse of the students already. So it's a bit more rich in terms of engagement. It's a bit more flexible in terms of group messages and the way you can facilitate discussions. And ultimately, I do think it's a richer form of engagement than plain Canvas. Just checking if there are any questions. I'm so sorry I don't have the participant. Okay, no questions raised for now. But sorry, go ahead.
Okay. The floor is still open for a few more questions, or maybe 1 to 2. We have 8 minutes left for questions. You may unmute yourselves or you may type in the chat box.
Just to reply to MA Lacson, yes, Monopoly is it's one of the successful things that I really was able to implement both on-site and in the context of online learning. Because, for example, just to cite an example, when you buy above market value from Monopoly, you result in gains and losses. And then eventually I'm able to say, oh, the gains and losses that you see in the income statement of these public
I think Sir Sevi got disconnected. We can wait for a bit.
less intimidating when they do real finance or when they tackle real financial statements from real companies. So that's one of the I guess successful tools.
Genesis Kelly Lontok has a question. What would be the general nature of your discussion posts? Would they be a mix of theory and practice or more of practice? Mr. Sevidal is just facing some internet technical issues right now. We can wait for him until 3:30 p.m.
Leon. Leon, hello. You there?
Hello, Sir Ben.
Yeah, this question, this is the same Zoom link we'll use for the succeeding sessions. No? Same Zoom
Sir,
link.
Sir Galvin. If you are assigned to a different session, we will send a master document for the rest of the links. I can put
Yeah,
that.
if it's room 5, it's the same, no? The same link.
For room 5, yes. So
Yes,
if your next session is room 5, you'll just stay here.
Okay.
But if it's not room 5, you'll just need to click on the next link in the schedule.
Okay, thanks.
I will put down in chat the master document for the other links.
Sorry guys, we're just encountering some technical difficulties. Ganyan talagang buhay natin. No? So, we still actually have until 3:30 here. So if you don't mind, we'll just wait for Sevi to get back. He might still be able to answer some of the questions that you posted over chat. And then we will end the session at 3:30. So, yeah, so feel free to put the questions over chat. Leon will take note of them and we'll read them out to Sevi, hopefully when he gets back. If in case he doesn't get back for any other technical reason, Leon, please save the questions from the chat box, and then
Yes, sir.
we'll send an email to Sevi, and we will email the attendees of today's session so that you can also get some replies from him. Sayang, medyo may technical difficulty so far. Sige. Ayan, since may dead air tayo, I can see that some of you have gotten good ideas as to how we can make the most out of our remaining few minutes. So if there was something that struck you in Sevi's presentation, some tips that he shared, something that he shared that he was doing that you feel is interesting to try out, feel free to head over chat and share it with the rest of us here. No? It would be a nice way to also process that presentation. There was a lot shared, and even I picked up a couple of things that I'd like to try out in my class a little more. You know? Yeah.
For all the comments and questions, I will just forward them to Mr. Sevidal through email, and we can email you his responses.
Right. So I'm not so sure if he will still be able to come back. It's a minute to 3:30. So Leon, maybe we can just close the session
Yep.
and can give instructions.
Okay, so thank you to Mr. Sevidal, even if he's not here, and all the participants who joined us for this session. You may now move to the next session, and I will be posting in chat again the master document for the Zoom links of the other sessions, just in case any of you needs it. And our next session will begin at exactly 3:40 p.m. with Dr. Rodora Nictao. Thank you, everyone.